Hello, puppies and kittens. We're going to open today's show with a chat, a super chat. Larry Fishman for $6.66 says, "Are you ready to blaspheme?"
Woo! Yes.
All right, Anastasia, what do we have? Our interpreter in Hebrew, Tomer,
Mm.
and we have Lawrence, who can also do a bit of that. I think he has other languages under his belt as well. You don't have Hebrew, right?
No, I don't have Hebrew. I got ancient Greek though, so I'll be more helpful once we get to the New Testament. But
Okay. Yep, and also Russian, which I guess is just never going to be relevant in this
it
case.
will not.
Unless we start comparing the
And
Russian Orthodox Bible.
Maybe.
and Lilith, of course. So, welcome everybody. Lalandra should be joining us momentarily, and we are on. What is it? Chapter 32. I've been waiting for this one because I understand
Yeah.
there are multiple interpretations. I read it very simplistically, but I can't wait to jump into this one.
Well,
Yeah.
we do have a lot of those Southern Baptist ministers who insist on the most simple and literal reading of anything. So even if more complex readings exist, they aren't always the forefront of the zeitgeist.
Isn't that remarkable? I can't tell you how many times I've seen the Southern Baptists
Mhm.
insist on using the King James Bible on the excuse that science changes, but the Bible ain't never changed in 300 years.
Oh God. Okay. Um, I told you the story of how Jack Chick is part of the one of the conspiracy theories about how the King James version is the only uncorrupted version of the English Bible.
Mm-hmm. You
Yeah.
said only, he meant most.
Well, he was he got into some crazy conspiracy theories, and one of them was that, the Jesuits were running around corrupting all the other English translations because evil is evil. And it's really amazing, actually. If you look at some of the magazines on his website are still available, you can just flip through them on the website, some of his tracts where he goes over these conspiracy theories that he's believed for decades. I mean, he's dead now, thank goodness, but and they entered the evangelical consciousness. The stuff about Halloween being Satan's birthday, about um what was it, Islam and coming
Okay, now
from
tell me about Satan's
Catholicism.
birthday.
Oh yeah, well, the Halloween is Satan's birthday, and the witches and wizards all celebrate it, and they'll sacrifice someone on it, and try and influence children with drugs and make them want to sacrifice your pets. And that's not even close to the craziest stuff Jack came up with.
So
And
instead of three wise men from the east, was it three idiots from the west who showed up at the manger?
No, that part's legit. That part's legit.
I don't think they ever made it to the manger. They just sort of wandered into the Red Sea and were never seen from again.
It's wild that people like that exist because it sounds like at this point like almost a meme. Like I don't think I've ever even spoken to like a Christian in real life that actually believes that kind of thing. Because it's just so wild that even
But
they
I
like
remember hearing stories of I knew a guy who XYZ, and those stories
right,
came from chick tracts.
yeah.
They had just infiltrated people's minds.
Yeah,
And yeah, it was pretty crazy.
yeah. The thing about
Mm.
the KJV is like even in like the very first print run, they said in like the introduction like that better ones will come, better translations will
Oh,
come at some point, so it shouldn't
well,
be
and English
taken as like
changes.
yeah, that too. But they weren't even
Imagine
considering
translating
that.
the KGV into Hebrew.
Oh my god, that'd be
Yeah.
horrible. The and furthermore, when they basically said that when they were arguing for like an authenticity for it, they called the text that they used the or one of the texts that they use, the Textus Receptus, the received text. It's the one that has been handed down to them, so it had like this air of tradition. It was essentially a marketing campaign. But yeah, the fact that they even said in their own introduction that it will be like at some point in the future, there's probably going to be a better release with like better
Well,
manuscripts and stuff
they
like that.
used the best manuscripts they had at the time, as
Yeah,
you do. No
exactly.
hate on that, but obviously things would change. It's been part of the reactionary movement of the evangelical church. In its God, I wish I had my full library with me. I don't, because I got some very interesting books from a pastor's library when he moved, and one of them included this like basically what Sunday school lessons, and you can see from like the 1920s, so like 100 years ago, and you can see in the evangelical movement, there's the Protestants worship the Bible, which they receive via tradition from the Catholic Church, and then they spend all their time bad mouthing the Catholic Church and reminding us that you can't believe a single thing they say, which is rather a strange thing to do to your only witness, but okay, fine. But they more that criticism and scholarship said, hey, actually this may not be as simple as we thought. That made them uncomfortable, and instead of learning and expanding, they doubled down on this air of inauthenticity, absolute authenticity, just a blind belief in it, no evidence. And that's when you end up with Jerry Falwell saying that these words were dictated by God into the ear of each of the prophets as they wrote them, that God dictaphoned that through them, and that the King James Version is the only one Satan hasn't had a chance to corrupt.
Okay, so God meant to say unicorn.
Yes.
That
Yes.
is ridiculous.
Yeah. I should have talked about the unicorn interpretation that at least appears in Job. At least in the Hebrew Bible, it doesn't really say unicorn.
Yeah,
It
it
says
wouldn't.
M, but
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely get to. We'll have a lot to talk about once we get to
Yeah.
Job and even the
Oh,
Psalms
Job
as
is
well.
fun
Yeah,
times.
for right now, I mean, I
the
just
mythology
did a
person.
video about me talking to God in the form of, where I'm sitting in for Job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody's seen that video, but if for anybody that wants to take the idea that the Bible is directly dictated by God and that these are all the words that God chose, then God is an idiot who has
Yep.
no idea what anything is or does.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
really true.
Yeah. Do you cast lightning bolts? Do they appear before you and say, "Here we are"? The fuck,
Yes.
man.
Do you have the storehouses of the snow? Do you bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades? No, I don't control astrology because astrology is bullshit.
But no, think about it. If these people think that this is all literal verbatim dictation, these are the words God meant to
I've
use.
had Christians on Twitter actually be like, quote Job, have you this? Have you that? Do you bind the influences of the Pleiades? She was literally copying from Job. And I'm like, okay, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. And stop quoting ancient astrology. You're supposed to be against that. You're an evangelical.
And so God is arguing that the earth is the shape of a wax seal, which is a flat circle.
So he punched it. Are we saying he punched it? He just like, boom. There goes the earth. And the mountains are the little crevices between his fingers. And
we will explore Job again
when we get there.
Yeah, relatively soon. I'm going to read a couple more comments that have just come up. First of all, we got Kicker White Lion for 50 Czech kroner says Dinosuchus, Dinokairos, and Deinonychus and a Dinotherium walked into a bar. Everyone there had a terrible time.
Oh,
And then from Omega, was it Omegaya? Omegaya 1 for $10 Canadian says, I have a request for a near future episode. Is there any commentary regarding Genesis 38 and the birth of Tamar's twins?
Tamal. I think she was referring to Amnon and
Perez and
Tamal.
Sarah, Judah and Tamar. Yeah, that's a. I'm gonna have a lot to say.
And then
about
just to
that.
finish the message, besides proof that no woman wrote the Bible, I mean.
So, I mean, we're gonna have plenty of commentary once we get there. I think I'm still in the process of reading a book on that entire section, anyways.
Awesome.
So,
I will have
hopefully
things to
once
say.
we get there, yeah.
Yep.
But on there being no woman that wrote the Bible, it's very likely that the Song of Solomon was written by a woman.
So I've got a couple more to get to. I don't want to miss them. So April Van Ryn says, isn't the only significant difference between the Catholic and Protestant that one believes all stories are literal and the other believes some are metaphor?
Actually, it's more that the Protestants worship the Bible, not God, and the Catholics worship the authoritarian structure of the church.
I'm glad you observed that the Protestants worship the Bible. They're bibliolaters.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
The
the other
Bible is
way
their idol.
I've often said that the way to tell the Catholics apart from the Protestants, at least within the clergy, the way to tell Catholic clergy from Protestant clergy is by which gender of children they molest.
Ah! And among the laity, whether they read the Bible, because the Catholics tend to just leave it to the professionals.
Yeah, that's the thing with the Catholics. Like a lot of really good scholarship has been done by Catholics. Like I cite them a lot on my show because it's been really solid work. So it's definitely weird having these. The thing is, having sects like this, to me, like it makes sense where you have different interpretations of.
Now you said having sex like this. That's SECT, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Very important, considering what was just said. So, but like I will get that people have different interpretations of the same texts. But I also feel like these are things that can be worked out. But I guess people don't really like talking about issues all that much more than they just like to disagree. So
Alan Watts made a very astute observation about churches. It's that every church is set up in the state of the legal court at sort of its peak in power. The Catholic is very much like the court of a king with all the grandiosity. The Anglicans are like trying to out Catholic the Catholics, but still with the Protestant vibe. You end up with certain Presbyterians, they'd have like the choristers set up with the the pulpit to the side, and you'd have almost like a judge and jury scenario set up. It looks very much like that. So I think we don't forget, but it bears saying that these sects are as much about power as about any ideological difference. And
Yeah, definitely.
that's why there's so much fucking genocide when they split up. Fortunately, a little less so now, but still, a lot of dead people.
Yeah, well put. I've got a couple more chats that have just popped up, so let me get to those. Coffee Mom 49. Oh no, I'm gonna do this one. Matt White. Why does it seem that the U.S. and A, or I guess that means U.S. of A, is clamoring for the religious condition they self-yeeted from 1776? See also Merkin media coverage of QE2 death and funeral, C3 ascension. I'm not sure what all that's referring to. QE2, that's Queen Elizabeth II, right? And
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know what C3 ascension is.
Oh, Charles
the
III.
Third.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got you.
See, I'm from Canada, so we retain a thing with the monarchy, but it's like they're just symbolic. They don't actually have political power. The rulers don't rule anymore. They're the crown, the personification of the country, as it were, and that's their role. It's
Yeah, I'm surprised that somebody would think that we know British politics. We're American, damn it. We don't even know our own politics.
hey, you are. I'm but the thing is that they did yeet from any kind of ecclesiastical and religious control in 1776, and it was the best decision America ever made. The problem, well, or one of, but the problem is that ever since, like, for a century now at least, the evangelical churches and the Evangelical Alliance, even honestly the Evangelical Alliance, Colonel Ingersoll mentioned them just after the Civil War. They have been using propaganda to try and root out, and they have rooted out from your education the fact that was well understood at the establishing of America, that religious power, political power, is a terrible, evil, horrible, no good thing, that it always goes wrong, that it always leads to abuse, that you must never, ever, 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 ever allow political power in the hands of religious institutions, because it's just a recipe for hell on earth in every situation, everywhere, always the same. It never goes well. The less religion there is in power, the better. And that was honestly what America was founded on. And then you've had 200 years of propaganda to try and make you forget that.
Coffee Mom offers $4.99, says, good morning from St. Louis. I've had some fun conversations with Christians since this project started, and the context you provide is so helpful. Oh, thank you very much for that.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. Then Kyle Maxwell, $5, says, off topic, but as a Mormon, I keep counting the days to your Book of Mormon live feed. So, and then Ivory Darkness says, just bought a new Mormon quad to follow along with both series. I'm color coding different markers to reference specific parts earlier or easier, and have it at the ready for protesters at Pride.
Awesome.
That is very smart. That is very smart, because like I've been doing this for a long ass time, and I mean so is Aaron, and I mean I'm sure everyone else has their own personal journeys that I'm not entirely sure of, but when it comes to remembering exact like chapters and verses and themes, when you're actively in a discussion like that, it is hard to remember, honestly, because you remember your feelings about X, Y, and Z, and you might remember a story here and there, but getting into specifics gets more and more difficult from memory. So it's very smart to have a Bible labeled like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So who is doing the reading today?
Well, before we begin, I've had to comment on something that I've said in the previous episode about the divination, where I said that in the Hebrew Bible it reads "I guessed." I should have clarified that the word means "I guessed" in modern Hebrew, but in the Bible it refers to divination, as we see in Deuteronomy 18:10. Nichush means to practice divination.
So
But
he was doing magic.
yeah, but it wasn't guessing. The guessing part was just modern Hebrew, and I made it as a joke. But I should have stressed that what I said is in modern Hebrew. However, I
Fair enough.
did find that the word probably originates from the Akkadian word nuchshu, which means abundance, prosperity, or fertility. So, in the context of the
Yeah,
verse that we talked about,
I think I actually did note that for that word.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
it could suit. Sorry, English bad.
So
It
the
could fit.
question
Sense
remains.
of divination as the definition, that doesn't make any more sense than guessing.
Well, yeah,
Well,
but to them, it was a big difference, because they did believe in magic and still do. Maybe a little less so than is presented in Genesis, but I mean everyone in the ancient Near East believed in magic. They had spells. They had
They had
higher.
intros.
They had what?
They had entrails.
They had entrails,
How the
definitely.
entrails
They had
were.
entrails.
Reading
Yeah.
the ghost's liver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had prophets for hire. Like being a prophet was a job title. Kings would hire people to be prophets. So they took divination very seriously. You'd go to train. They would do that in ancient Greece as well. In
It's
ancient
not
Rome.
that they
Yeah.
didn't take it seriously or didn't believe it, but it is not a good method of ruling or deciding things.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
isn't.
I agree with you.
Mhm.
Like
It is a
effectively,
good method of getting in a position to make decisions.
that.
Put
Yeah,
it
that
that
is
way.
true. That is
Yeah,
true.
but the blood of the prophets, they never listen to the prophets, and what happens?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
always easy to retcon that nobody listened to me and I knew the whole time.
Yeah. Right. Right. Gotta love those retcons.
Yeah.
Pathos. Now, who should read for Genesis 32? Do we have too many names in here? We don't. We just have Jacob and
No.
Esau.
Well, it's Jacob and Esau, and then the next one is Jacob's wrestling
Jacob
thing in
and
this one.
God.
Yeah, this is the Jacob wrestling the angel.
I
Aaron
think
should do it because there's a
Yeah.
voice of God in here.
I was gonna say I'll read the first part if you want, but I think Aaron should read
The
Jacob
part.
wrestles with God.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So shall we start?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Genesis 32. Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of God." And so he named that place Mahanaim. How bad is it?
Machanaim, but okay.
Mahanaim. Okay, not
Well,
bad.
that's what I would have said.
Well, I did not enough phlegm, but close.
It would have been a little bit more Machanim, but yeah.
Mahanaim.
Machanaim.
Mahanaim. Jacob
Okay.
sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my master Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkey, sheep and goats, men servants and maid servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord that I might find favor in your eyes." And when the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, "We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him."
So let's go back to the angels of God. So Rashi and Ibn Ezra comment that these angels are meant to escort him into the Holy Land. And Nachmanides writes that the angels informed him that they that are with him are more than they that are with them.
So shades of Elisha's servant at the siege. We'll get to that eventually. But yeah, same phrasing there. I notice with what he says here, because obviously having received the blessing of the patriarchy, he is making it very clear, I am not here to claim headship over you. I have all my own property. I'm not here to steal back from you whatever I could claim from our father, who presumably has died in all this time that he's gone off, married 2 women, worked for 2 decades. I mean, he was old and blind when he left, and now he has like 10, 11 kids. And so he's very conciliatory. It's very, your servant begs leave to attend, because technically, because of his stealing Esau's blessing, he could hypothetically come in and say, "I am the leader of the family and the master, and I take all the lion's share of my father's goods for myself," hypothetically. I don't think he wants to fight Esau on that, though.
Okay. Now, about Machanaim, according to Rashi, this name means 2 camps, one consisting of the angels ministering outside the land of Israel, who had come with him thus far, and the other of those ministering in the land of Israel, who had come to meet him. And Ibn Ezra writes that the camps are that of Jacob and that of the angels.
Okay. I can see that interpretation.
And the messengers in verse 3, this actually reads as angels in the Hebrew Bible. Rashi comments that these are actual angels. However, Ibn Ezra comments that they are from among his servants.
Yeah, so kind of in contrast to that commentary. So yeah, noting that the root word there is camp, so it'd be twin, twin camps. So according to Alter, it's a signification that will be played out in a second narrative etymology when Jacob divides his family and flocks into two camps.
I
Yeah,
was
that's what I was
thinking of that
thinking.
too. Yeah.
He
Right.
divided the women and others into one, and he put them behind the first camp. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but
We are, but I think it's a reflection in that, and possibly one of those, sort of mirrorings in the text, prefiguring the idea of the two camps.
Yeah, Matt White comments, and thy brother cometh with many Fremen warriors. Sorry, Mom,
Well, I mean, if Esau's coming with 400 men, because he did swear to kill him. I mean, it's been over a decade, so you'd hope you've chilled out a little bit, but he did swear, I'm going to come for your head. So, Jacob is very clearly like, I'm hoping I'm not leading my whole family to be slaughtered.
Yeah.
Go team. Sorry. Yes. Now, okay. Then the messengers returned to Jacob, and they said, we went to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. And here it is. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who has said to me, go back to your country and to your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with the children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper and make your descendants like the sands of the sea, which cannot be counted.
So a couple things here. First of all, narrative-wise, if your reasoning for splitting the group in two would be, oh well, if Esau comes and attacks one, then the other one can get away. When you just split it up into more groups than that, I don't know. This seems like that would be a better idea. But because they're doing the whole twin thing, and because they're the brotherly rivalry of Jacob and Esau, and in fact, brotherly rivalries all throughout Genesis.
and not just Genesis. I mean, it crops up everywhere. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Right, but
Thor
especially
and
Genesis.
Loki. I mean, how many examples do we have, right?
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
but those weren't really around yet. But I meant specifically for biblical literature. Like Genesis is filled with those kind of brotherly rivalries, and this would, splitting the camp in two might be another reflection of this kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like this kind of kinship division. Yeah.
And also I noted that the first few verses, which we were discussing how there's a difference in the division between chapters here last time, but the first few verses and the name of two camps is, at least in my breakdown, from a different author than the subsequent story. I have this as Elohist and the next as Yahwist. So in the weaving together from different sources, there is an attempt to justify or reflect whatever was, or tie in the two different stories in a way that sort of makes sense or reflects each other a lot of the time, I've noticed, in these divisions.
So interestingly on that, I was reading from Van Setters earlier, and on specifically these verses here that you're mentioning. And he argues for the opposite. He's like, no, you can't really divide this one. The reasons for its division are kind of weak, honestly. So he comes to a different conclusion. Like for one of the things, like if you take some of the people who are advocating for that, I think Wellhausen's initial argument part of it was at least, oh, you could take out this prayer and it would read just fine. And while that is true, it part of the prayer is also kind of like a setup to the next part, and
Yeah.
it's not really necessary for it to be taken out like that. So that's really not enough to go on. And I wish I would have bookmarked it. Actually, that would have been nice to have. But he argues that this part would have still been a Aoistic source. Now, of course, it's important to note that his interpretation of these authors is starkly different from
Mhm.
that of Wellhausen. He places them much later because he
Fair
is
enough.
more of the supplementary hypothesis, which is the kind of camp that I fall into. And I think he does a brilliant job arguing for it in general. So they'd be much later texts
I can
than
see that.
Wellhausen's initial hypothesis.
It's,
Uh,
there's different opinions and there's arguments to be made on both sides. But I think, what I'm observing in the sense of harmonizing the text is still something I observe all the way through, that someone is, harmonizing from different sources, whether supplementary, fragmentary, or some combination thereof. I use the original documentary hypothesis as a rough sketch, as a bones in my understanding of it.
yeah,
And
that's
I
a good
think
way to look at it. Yeah.
it has some value certainly in that. But even to say something is a Yahwist source, that means hypothetically whatever was saved from the library of Judah before they burned the temple down. Who knows what that is, or even if those sources were complete when they were, or what was saved, what was lost, what was fragmentarily kept or able to be kept. But we've encountered this several times where like the two flood stories are woven together from different sources, and there's something, I think also the superstitious attachment to certain phrasing in the people, in different areas of the people, because of course these are different tribes being drawn together when the Pentateuch is sort of finalized. And so you can see some of that where it's like, there'll be this phrase or something that'll be common amongst a group, and you have to weave that in and make it part of what, the narrative, so that it finds a place and everyone feels like it's familiar still or relates to some part of it. At
Kyle
least.
Maxwell comments $5. Thank you. Says, wife says I must leave because she's jealous of how much I love you, Aaron.
Aww.
You are truly doing God.
That's awesome. Ah, yeah, but again, I'm hypothesizing in a lot of these things. I do the best I can, but there's disagreements for all kinds of reasons, and good reasons. There's definitely different interpretations we can take.
Now, I still had a question. When so Jacob is wandering along, and two angels appear.
Mm-hmm.
How does he know they're angels?
Well, does he know they're angels, or does the author know that they're angels?
Well, when he
Good
saw
point.
them, he said, "Truly, this is a place of God."
Oh yeah, that is true. Yeah, I guess they must have. I mean, angels themselves have been said to have a very non-human form in many ways. So,
Well,
like, we're not
um,
there yet.
I mean, I'm assuming they weren't Eye of Sauron angels.
Oh,
Maybe
what
they were just a bit
if they
glowy.
were? Now, if they were, then that would make perfect sense.
So they were
however,
they were Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, both with full wings.
Maybe they were just
however,
a bit glowy.
I did read an interpretation where when there is the figure that is called Ish, a man, then this means that the angel is in the form of a man. But it's later on.
Okay. Well, presumably they had to at least sometimes appear human. But the Eye of Sauron floating fiery eyes and wings scenario is I mean, I would just scream and run in terror and hide from the eldritch horror, but I'm not a prophet, so
In some of the interpretations, angels are neuter. They have no genitalia. But then in others, they come down and procreate with women.
Yeah. So those are, um, that would be more of an issue of the piety of each sect. Um, so when it came to like a book like Enoch, where
Mm.
they, they did procreate with women, uh, then it suited, their purposes that they were going for.
Yeah, I
Um,
got to throw a chat in here. April Van Ryn says, because they're hot, because angels are sexy, right, Lawrence?
Oh yeah, but on this, so our recent reading, we just finished the Apocalypse of Peter on our Friday Apocryphal
All
podcast,
right.
and
Oh, that
after all
was
the hell
a
stuff,
fun one.
Peter sees the heavenly stuff, and he's describing the angels, and he's like, oh, their beauty is indescribable, and they're sexy angels, so they're so hot um, that they just cannot be. Uh, Comprehended, and that might be how he knew. Yeah, maybe it's because they were just super attractive.
There were ancient beliefs that beauty was a blessing from the gods and a certain sign of sanctity. And one of the most hilarious stories, granted, I think this was from ancient Rome, was of a prostitute who was accused of impiety or blasphemy. And her legal defense, which worked, was to strip naked in the court and say, "Are you really willing to destroy this?" Which was actually a legal argument because obviously she was really freaking hot. And if beauty was a blessing from the gods, then clearly she could not have offended the gods because the gods would not give a blasphemer dem titties.
If you got it,
I love
flaunt
how
it.
you put it that it was a legal argument because she's really damn hot.
Hey, you know what? If God didn't love me, would I have these titties? I don't think so.
Mobile game reviewer says, I'm new to the video. If Moses wrote Genesis in a time when books couldn't be preserved very well, can it be said that the texts were changed or mistranslated in some places? Yes, mobile game reviewer, you are new to this series.
Moses did not
Good
write
news.
That
Genesis.
comes up in every episode.
There was no Moses, and
I
he didn't write shit.
Yeah, I made a video on this. You could look it up. Did Moses write the Torah? The short answer is no. He did not.
The long answer is there really probably was no Moses, or like, in the way that there was no Robin Hood, like there might have
Right.
been someone who, a lot of stories kind of built up and became this whole other character that had little to nothing to do with the original guy, but whatever.
Yeah, some of it has a kernel of truth. But
It's like the kernel of corn that comes through in the turd.
the actual history of the text of the Old Testament, and specifically for the Torah, it's we've been arguing about it academically at least for like 150 years, and that a lot of insightful things have come from all that scholarship, but when, like, if you were, like, pretty much what Lilith was saying, it was essentially like a national hero complex, likely more like a King Arthur, if anything. So that would be where the vast majority of scholars kind of fall into. Thomas Romer has an interesting section on this in a few of his papers, and he covers it a little bit in his the so-called Deuteronomistic history, even though it's not generally about that. But then Van Setters covers it more in depth in his Life of Moses. So actually, yeah, I'd recommend the Life of Moses. It's very well written. It's like, even if you're brand new to biblical studies, like, I'd read like a more introductory book, like Friedman's Who Wrote the Bible. That's a very introductory book to the documentary hypothesis. And then once you have at least understood some of the broad concepts in it, then I would say read The Life of Moses, because he does use a lot of jargon, but it's like if you just understand what the concepts are, you should be fine.
Yeah, I'm curious to ask you about these concepts, but I'm thinking we're getting little bits of it as we continue on, which is one of the reasons one of the reasons I asked you to be on this show, and that prompts another question for me. Have you gained any more following from participating in this series?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We have more active chats now. I think a lot of those viewers have probably come from this stream, which is great. Uh, and I think that so I want to try like a different style of video. I want to see how that goes. Um, but I still really like doing like those long documentary style videos because I think they're the most insightful. But I also
Well, they're
understand,
also they are very informative, and you do them well.
yeah, but they're also kind of boring, right? So
Well, I enjoy them.
I like that kind of stuff, but I'm weird, I guess. But still,
Yeah.
I like it.
I'm going
yeah,
to read out another chat. Frederick Agerbo says in the Danish Bible, the first five books are called the Books of Moses, but the Gospels is called by their full Latin names. In the English Bibles, it's opposite. Do anybody know why?
The
mm,
books of Moses, I mean, the Pentateuch has long been attributed to Moses sort of mythologically. Um, the recognition that that wasn't the case has been very, very difficult for, well, evangelicals. They're totally in denial about it. I don't know. The Gospels are called by their full Latin names.
in the Danish Bible, I'm guessing.
What would
Uh,
that be?
yeah, I'm not sure. Um,
I just
so
want to acknowledge Lalandra's adorable danger noodle.
hello, Danger Noodle.
This is Apophis, the enemy of Ra. He is the
Oh,
god of chaos. Ra's the god of the sun, and Apophis, the giant snake, kind of like a Jormungandr equivalent, attacks the tree of life, and every day attacks the barge of Ra as he goes across the sky with the sun and trying to swallow the sun and return the world to darkness.
so you're telling me that the great battles of ancient mythology are being undertaken in your house as we speak?
Yes.
Yeah.
She says it all adorably. Yeah. All right, and then we have Lady Moonweb says, I started watching MA because of this channel, so thank you for that connection. I'm Milwaukee Atheist,
Aw,
Dan.
Milwaukee Atheist, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very
Awesome.
much
I
for that,
appreciate
Lady Moonweb.
the viewership and the hopping into the chat. We really love that.
Yeah, so at this point, if you want to get a fast forward toward the end of the book, if you're looking for spoilers, Lawrence has been working for like 5 years on a similar series on his channel, and that's on Sundays, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think I don't know if we're finishing First Corinthians tomorrow
And you
or
have all the cool apocryphal stuff, like the Apocalypse of Peter, which inspired Dante, I'm pretty sure.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah,
isn't that an interesting thing? How this inspired Dante, and then look how Dante returned the favor, right? I mean, with Christianity adopting
yeah, which is
his
Dante
book.
wild.
was just trying to tell the Pope to fuck off. He didn't know he was writing canon, and he took a lot of the stuff from the Apocalypse of Peter. He just wanted to tell the Pope to fuck off. And in fairness, he was very successful at that.
Yeah, like it was meant, because the oh man, that is really funny that you say that. Like he didn't know he was writing canon. Because the thing is, a lot of like the New Testament authors and even some of the Old Testament authors, they didn't know they were writing canon, but for them it was much more literal because they did become canon. Uh, but then something like uh, Dante, like yeah, like ridiculous that has like because the imagery is so strong, right? They kind of rolled with it, but like nowhere in like there is like some hints of a lake of fire stuff in the actual Bible, but you don't really get many specifics. But then with the Apocalypse of Peter, oh, you get some specifics and they are juicy.
And they reflect Dante quite a lot. But the thing is with Dante is because he was screwed over and ended up cut off from Geneva all his life because of a dirty trick played by the Pope. And I read someone in an article a long time ago who said that the amount of times he called out the Pope specifically, it was essentially equivalent to if Kanye West made an album about you, naming you personally in every song and calling you a motherfucker, every single song calling you out, and it went double platinum.
Speaking of, I think April might be working on this one, but we're still accepting Lawrence diss tracks. So please submit your Lawrence
Ooh.
diss tracks.
I didn't even know about that. Hello,
That's right.
baby.
Yeah.
Oh, battle for the ages.
Yeah.
Do the noodles like
Pardon.
to sit in your hair?
Some of them do, yes. Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
adorable.
get back to the topic.
Beg your pardon. All right, where was I reading from?
Yeah, I just think it's
I had
interesting that fan fiction, essentially in the case of Dante, becomes recognized and integrated into the story. I mean, it's like when they did the series of cartoons on the for Star Wars that ended up being
Yep. Well,
integrated
the
into
Book
the
of
next movies.
Mormon is fan fiction that became someone's canon. Granted,
Indeed.
a splinter group, but it was.
Yeah, but
it was,
that was more mischievous.
Yeah, that was less accidental and more intentional.
Yeah, it's like this guy was writing a book of fiction, and he didn't intend it to become fact. But
Yeah.
when you look at somebody like Joseph Smith or L. Ron Hubbard, those guys were deliberately trying to deceive people.
They were. Dante was just trying to piss off the Pope. Now, where did I go? They were surely making.
I had commentary.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I have commentary. So, verse 7, great fear and distress. So, according to Rashi, he was afraid to be killed by Esau and was distressed that he might have to kill someone.
That he might have to fight back against the 400 men who are presumably coming to slaughter his family.
Could be.
Now, see, this is why you need an AR-15.
If Jacob had an AR-15, he wouldn't have had to be worried about them 400 men.
And then if Esau had the same thing, he'd be like, well, this is why we need cannons. If Jacob had a cannon.
So, now, verse 10, I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan. So, Rashi comments that the plain meaning of is that he did not have any silver or gold or cattle, just his staff. He also adds that the midrashic explanation is that he had placed his staff in the Jordan, and the Jordan had divided for him to pass over.
Of course, we have to add that miracle here for no frickin' reason. I'm going to go with the literal-minded people on this, which is that he literally walked away with nothing but the clothes on his back and the staff and, presumably a few rations. And then he's coming back, with sheep and goats and cattle and a family and slaves and, everything that makes life worthwhile.
Okay.
But anyway. So he's divided the camp into two. He's prayed to remind God that you made a promise. And then he spent the night there, and from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother Esau. 200 female goats and 20 male goats. 200 ewes and 20 rams.
Are you sure that's enough? Because there's 400 men there.
Well, there's also 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, and 20
I don't think you got
donkeys.
enough female goats.
Well, funny enough, Rashi comments that 200 female goats have need of 20 male goats, and so too in the case of all the various species that males were in number according to the needs of the females.
And how does that reflect on Noah's Ark?
Noah's a dumbass. We knew this. He wasn't carrying the parasites. Oh no. Anyway, side note. So he put them 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. And he put them in the care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, "Go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds." And he instructed the one in the lead, saying, When my brother Esau meets you and asks, to whom do you belong and where are you going and who owns all these animals in front of you, then you will say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he is coming behind us. And he instructed the second and the third and all the others who followed the herds. You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. Be sure to say, your servant Jacob is coming behind us. For he thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I am sending on ahead later. When I see him, perhaps he will receive me. So Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in the camp.
So before we continue on, just one quick note. So I'm sure Tomer would love to actually say this word because I know I'm going to butcher it. So the word that's used for tribute there is it minha?
Mincha.
Minha. Okay. So the word by itself can mean gift, but it has another meaning in cultic context where it means sacrifice. So it's important to realize, since it's the same word, the kind of same idea between gifts and sacrifices in the ancient world, and that will become important throughout the reading.
It's a bit of a
Gotta read this one
tributary
at this
kind of a
time,
vibe.
too.
Yeah.
Trevor and Wright says, why is it that in the Bible it claims the Israelites dwelt in Egypt, but the
Merneptah.
Merneptah still.
Merneptah still.
Stele mentions Israel being in Canaan already at that time?
So the interesting thing about the Merneptah stele is we don't the way that it's worded there, we don't know if they're talking about a group of people or a land. So it could have been referring to a tribe or the pacification of the land itself, which they called Israel. So that is as of yet unclear, and it might just be our issues with understanding the language, but yeah, the thing is, there's a few good books about the origins of the Israelites. I'm not gonna go over all the arguments right now. That would be simply too many. But I think what's Israel Finkelstein's book on it?
The Bible's Buried Secrets. No, that's the
No.
Nova documentary that's based on it. He has
No, he has one actually called "The Origins of the Israelites."
Yeah,
what
okay,
are the
that's
origins
not
of
the
the
one I
Israelites?
have. I have a different one.
There's also one by William
several.
Deaver on it as well.
Hmm.
But those would be good starting points. And I think they actually do disagree, but there are, of course, some commonalities between them.
Basically, I think we can pretty strongly say, though, that the Israelites were never in Egypt collectively.
Yeah.
Some, no doubt, were enslaved in Egypt as wars happened and people were captured and made slaves. But there was never all the people enslaved as a racial group and then a great exodus. That's the mythology. Did perhaps stories from some runaway slaves affect that? Yeah, absolutely. But the people of Israel were Canaanites. And quite possibly, in that documentary I mentioned, there was it's interesting, they looked at the overthrow of a city by its slave population. It may have actually been sort of the beginning of the Jewish people and the encampments in the hills that then sort of became the Jewish people. And they had that same, because they're distinguished by the lack of pig bones, specifically in their earliest encampments. But that's a whole nother 6 or 7 shows if you want to get into that.
I appreciate listening to people that actually know what they're talking about, because I mean I have to be divided in what I know, and you guys are both concentrated, and I appreciate that. It just makes me feel I feel a little dumb listening to y'all, because y'all know so much that I don't. I haven't had the investment that you guys have.
But
gonna read
on the other side of the coin, like you have had a lot more investment in like evolutionary biology, and
Oh
if I
yeah.
ever have a question, any even wonderment about evolution, you are the first person I go to. And if you haven't made a video already about it, I will ask you straight up, because like I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I know like the general idea. I know some of the things, but that's far from expertise. So you would be
You
the first person I go to every single time.
are
And
in.
I'm
You
not an
have
expert.
taught. I
And
have
I'm
to
not
say
an
this.
expert on go on, go on.
Aaron, you have taught me so much. Like the idea that you could ever feel dumb compared to me is just completely mind-boggling to me because I you have taught me so much because I never learned what evolution was properly because indoctrination is stupid. And like you have so many series that I've watched over and over again. There was so much knowledge involved. I learned so much from your takedown of rods. It's really quite amazing how much information and education you managed to fit into taking out the what was it, that series against that one cult leader. It's in
Oh,
my
David
David
C.
C.
Pack.
Pack.
David C. Pack. Yeah. You are like several of my saved playlists. The one on the Ark, the one on David C. Pack, the refuting the irrefutable proof of God, but also the systematic classification of life. Like you replaced my entire missed education with that. And I have listened to it so many times. It's brilliant, it's so detailed, and it's so engaging, and it's so wonderful, and it makes my learning brain so happy.
Thank you very much for that. We must continue. It,
I would say that uh, you flatter me, Aaron. I'm not really an expert in Judaism. I only know my Hebrew. And I also bring the Jewish commentators. I just try what I can.
well,
But
you also do some homework for this. I mean, so
yes, I
I mean,
do.
He's
you
such a
have
good
you do you
student.
go through all these notes and everything, and so I mean, and then of course you've got a perspective, that just a natural perspective when you hear things. What we're whether we are technically American or not, um, we still
Yes,
have a Western
Canadians,
perspective that you have a different way of viewing it, and so you're going to get insights that we miss.
The
So I
Canadian
appreciate that.
evangelicals still import the focus on the family kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
there's some common ground. It's not all identical, but there's definitely some common
because
ground.
Canadians are like America light. I'm just
No, that's
joking.
just Alberta.
Oh, okay.
They're the Texas of Canada.
um, I should point out that in verse 16, where it says, keep some space between the herds, so Rashi comments that this was done to satisfy the eye of Esau, or as he said, that wicked man, and to amaze him by the size of the gift. Rashbam comments that this device makes each gift appear as a sign of Jacob's respect. When someone receives several gifts at intervals, he appreciates them even more.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if his blood was up to fight, and then it's like, wait a second, you're a gift to me, and then the next, and then you're a gift, and then you're a gift, and then you're a gift. It's a bit of psychology there. A person who gives you like 7 gifts in a row is probably someone you're gonna feel a little bit bad about stabbing the second you see them.
I want to conduct an experiment. So let's have somebody out there give me $1,000 a week for a couple months, and someone else just give me $10,000 as a lump sum. And then I'll be able to tell you which one I appreciate more.
Yeah,
Well, I
Although I'm
tried to
gonna-
get that.
good experiment. No ulterior motive there. Nope.
None.
Experiment. Good science.
Purely in the. Well, I tried to get that one end times guy to give you $1,000. Remember when he was insisting that the world was going to end by a certain date, and I said, "Why don't you put your money where your mouth is and give
Yeah.
Aaron a post-dated check for $1,000 after that date?"
It's hard to get these people held to that, because you remember when Harold Camping did that in 2001 or
Oh,
2011. When he did that, May 21st, it was his
Mhm.
date, and he said that the Earth was going to crack in half and all of that stuff. But the funny thing is that before that event happened, somebody got a picture of his ledger and leaked it. He was still making appointments for after the world was supposed to end.
Of course he was. Well, and it was
Okay.
his second time. The only blasphemy laws I have ever thought and had any merit was for false prophets who do this
So
kind of thing.
this guy, his followers, some of them killed either themselves or their own children. There were two people that killed or tried to kill their own children to save them from Satan because of this end times thing.
And tons of people, way more than that, funneled their entire life savings and their retirement savings into these billboards about how Jesus was coming in May. I remember those. It was
so when it
tragic.
didn't when May 21st at 6 p.m. Eastern time came and went. And by the way, we were at a Fellowship of Free Thought meeting out by the lake. We're having a big party celebrating the end of the earth that we know isn't really coming. But that's just what atheists do. When that came and went and the world did not end, they asked Harold Camping about this, of course, right? And he said, "Oh, it happened. It just happened spiritually."
It was the same thing with the Great Disappointment. It was the same thing with the people climbing up on top of their roofs for no apparent. What did they expect that to do? I
got a hold
know.
of this guy who told me that there was going to be the fourth tetrad of September 29th of 2016, I think it was.
Yeah, and Donald Trump is still president in secret because the America is a defunct corporation, right?
I was in Salt Lake City for the American Atheist National Convention, and I was talking to some guy out there. We got it on video, and he said that on this date that all of our financial systems were going to collapse. And I said, "Well, how will we know when that happens?" He said, "You won't be able to buy dinner in a restaurant because the entire the fiscal system will just collapse." And I'm like, "Okay, so on that date, if you can still buy me dinner, then you're going to have to buy me dinner and apologize and admit that you were wrong. I don't even need an apology. Just admit that you were wrong, that your prophecy was wrong." And he agreed with me on video that he would do that.
Didn't do it.
And of course, that time came and went. And I got him on video. I've got a record of it. So I contacted him, of course. And he's still trying to hedge excuses for how his prophecy didn't really fail.
This is why I left my ex. This is why I left Christianity. There's something that comes to, because your expectations and reality are not usually going to perfectly mesh. But there's different people, the people who learn and the people who never learn. If my expectations say X and reality does Y, the sane person says my expectations must have been wrong. I will learn from reality and adapt to it. And the arrogant, narcissistic jackass says reality is wrong. My expectations are perfect.
Gotcha. So I would love to get somebody on their end times. If you've got a prophecy, please share it. Let's get it on video. Let's discuss the details. I would love to do that. And then I want to hear what your bullshit excuse is when it doesn't happen. All right, so a couple more comments before we continue. Kent McLeod Jr. said, "Discovered Aaron when I was 18, now 26. He gave me the confidence to establish myself as an atheist despite having bashful relatives."
Aww.
Thank you very much. And then April Van Ryn once again says, "Lilith has a really good reading voice. It's clear, concise, powerful, and resonates well. I find it easy to pay attention to her." Well, thank you, April Van Ryn, but we're going to have to disappoint you because I've been told that I have to start reading from here on.
It's true. He has to read Jacob Wrestles with God.
So before we get to that beautiful, what is going to be a beautiful rendition, I'm very interested to know how each person comes to those prophetic conclusions about the end of the world. What I want to do at some point, I would like to read their works on these and then try to do kind of a meta-analysis of how they do it. I think that would be very interesting, and then I would try to do it too from the biblical texts.
You know who had all of their books?
Who's that?
The Amazing Randy.
Oh, did he? Okay, that sounds like
did.
something I have, yeah.
He did. He had all of their books. I don't know where his library is.
I've been there.
Oh,
I've been to Randy's house a couple of times. had dinner with the man a couple times, and
I'm
he
so
gave me
jealous.
a small tour of the Isaac Asimov library that was in his house, and his house was designed to look like a spaceship just out of Fort Lauderdale, or outside of Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
I love that man.
Yeah, I still have his number on my phone. Yeah. Anyway, I will. I will. Well, we got another. We got another chat. I have a prophecy that the sun will die in just about 5 billion years. Here's the money I'm betting for it.
Well done, Nicker White Lion.
Yeah.
That's a good bet. Nice,
Yep.
nice
So,
open ended.
all right, I'm going to try to read this thing now. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Now, this is a different translation than I'm used to.
Mhm.
Touched the socket of Jacob's hip. That's not,
Yeah, this is kind of accurate. He
Yeah.
touched. He touched. In the JPS, it reads he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, but in the Hebrew Bible, the word is vayega, which in modern Hebrew is to touch. So
Doesn't it mean, at least in some interpretations, that God hit him below the belt?
that's how I always interpreted that.
I've
As they
I've
tend
had a
to reference around the area and not
I've
just
had a
say God
commentary.
kicked him in the dick.
I've had a commentary on this, but I had also commentary for verse 22. Let me see where it is. Yeah, Rashi comments that the hip was violently torn from its joint.
Mm,
Yeah.
ouch.
Now you see, one of the interesting things about this is in I don't know how old this story is or how old the origin of this story is, but in the Hindu Mahabharata there is a similar account where Krishna is he's with King Arjuna, and King Arjuna has to wrestle a lake god. And the
Mm.
lake god does much the same thing. It hits him in the hollow of the thigh was the translation that I read. And so I have the Bible saying hit him in the hollow of the thigh or touched him in the hollow of the thigh, which sounds a little bit different, like ripping his pelvis out of whack. How do you do that? By touching somebody. This is a crotch shot. That's the only way I could interpret it. So I'm reading in the Mahabharata, it says the same thing, that this god was wrestling Arjuna, touched him in the hollow of the thigh. Arjuna won anyway, even though the god cheated. I'm like, where? This is 2 different aspects of the same story. The Hindu religion and the Jewish religion both seem to be based on this similar folklore or shared folklore. It seems.
There's at least a couple of common themes. It's quite different in the play out, but certainly if you take the Sumerian religion as sort of a common point that would have left a few scattered crumbs amongst both, you do end up with a few common themes like that. And I mean, yeah, it's if you think about dislocating his hip hypothetically, you could see, because Jacob does end up limping the next day.
Okay.
And that's I don't have any balls to be kicked in, but I imagine getting hit hard enough to limp the next day would be quite a problem.
Yeah. So and then the next line,
You get a really weird walk when you get kicked in the balls. Like it's like it just looks weird.
Yeah, and you get also this feeling that your
expertise.
entire stomach is now in your mouth.
That too, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Before we get to this, I should say that about what you said about the hollow of his thigh. Rashi comments that this is the upper thigh bone that is sunk in the hip. That is called the kaf, which is the hip, I think, in the translation.
It's called a what did you?
Kaf.
I can't say what I thought you said.
But I had commentary for verse 22, or do you want to continue with this? Or
yes, please.
So verse 22 about his 11 sons. So notice that it doesn't mention Dinah or 12 children. So, according to Bereshit Rabbah 76:9, Jacob placed her in a chest and locked her in so that Esau would not gaze upon her and take her from Jacob. Rashi adds that Jacob was punished for this because he had kept her away from his brother, for she might have led him back to the right path. She therefore fell into the power of Shechem, which we will read later on.
So
Man, these rabbinic interpretations are wild. Uh,
Yeah.
this yeah, but this kind of thing is seen throughout, where like no place in the text actually even suggests these things. They claim
No.
that it's going off of tradition, but like my fucking ass is going off of tradition. It's probably like very pretty recent
why are they
tradition, right?
so pro incestuous marriage? Why do all the marriages have to be incest?
Gotta,
Why?
you gotta keep it in the family.
He
the,
already had 3 wives.
For
the
Americans, we call Dina Dinah. Some people have
Dinah,
that
yeah.
name. Yeah. There's a song,
Really?
Someone's in the kitchen with
Dinah.
Dinah.
Yeah.
Someone's in the
Someone's in the
kitchen.
I know.
Yeah,
The that earworm in my head.
I do want to point out that these traditions that they're taking from, I mean, by the time they were writing, yeah, they would have been traditions, but I doubt that they started, that early. My what I could probably say happened would be at some point afterwards, after these writings, like because Jews aren't idiots. They're relatively smart people. So they have
Thank you.
noted through
Just kidding.
the
we
they're smart enough.
or excuse me, just to keep in context, Lawrence is part Jewish.
I'm
Yeah.
all Jewish. My entire family's Jewish.
Okay.
Yeah, but the what was I saying? Right. Okay. They can recognize problems in texts. They're very good and even encouraged to ask questions. So I would think that at some point in this question making process, they would just come up with these answers to be like, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, and then eventually those answers became tradition, which were recorded by rabbis later on. But yeah, it's
And this is
that's what
where
I have
I
to say about
see
rabbinic
the
interpretations.
apologetic mindset playing out, which
Yeah.
is the mindset that says this must be true, the written word must be true, and therefore if any inconsistency is found in our understanding of it, we just have to make up a story that makes it all make sense, and then it's okay. And as long as the story makes it make sense, we don't have to have any evidence for it, we don't have to have any background that suggests it. We just needs to iron out our problem, and if it irons out our problem, then that's the right answer.
Okay, I've got Ivory Darkness says, why do you have to hit Jacob in the dick? And then,
Eh.
and then in parentheses, TFS FTW. Then Xcomer ZZZ offers 50 Norwegian kroner with no message. Thank you very much for that. And then Isaac Raskin says there is a Jewish book series for children called The Little Midrash Boys. Or
the Middle Midrash says.
The Little Midrash says, and it has a lot of interesting stories for different midrashim.
Oh, I thank you. I didn't know that.
And then Gur Mania, $10. Thank you. Says, I blaspheme the Holy Spirit every day just to be on the safe side in case the Bible God is real.
Oh my God, I've done that too. I follow Satan on Twitter, and he'll be like, get up, assholes, it's time to sin. And I'm like, I deny the Holy Spirit. There, I committed the unforgivable sin. Now I can stay in bed. Leave me alone. Because I was really tired that morning. I didn't want to get up.
All right, now, so we have multiple interpretations of this, and this next bit also.
I didn't finish with my commentary. I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm very sorry, but yeah. So verse 24, Jacob was left alone. So according to the Talmud, Chulin 91a, he had forgotten some small jars, and he returned for them. Nachmanides writes that in the plain meaning, Jacob returned to his camp after ferrying his family across and commanded that all others pass over the brook before him, and so he remained behind them.
So
Okay.
he really is coming up the rear and sending his wives and children to face Esau first. Brave man.
And now a man wrestled with him. So Chazal in Bereshit Rabbah 77:3 explained that this was Esau's guardian angel. David Kimchi writes that the angels who speak with men and appear as people are described as men, ish, which this is how the figure is translated as. This is also the case in Joshua 5:13 and Daniel 9:21, where they use the word ish to describe these angels. He further adds that God sent this angel to strengthen Jacob's courage, and if Jacob prevails, he has no need to fear Esau.
So
Okay.
this is sort of a divinatory wrestling match.
Could be,
Yeah.
or it could be if you go
him
with
a
the.
lesson.
Or it could be if you go in the interpretation that this is Esau's guardian angel, which basically the angel tries to protect Esau.
Yeah, we're about
Yeah.
to see another angle on this, though. Are you done with your commentary, Tomer?
No. About he could not overpower him. Nachmanides writes that the angel could not prevail against Jacob because it was not permitted to him by God to do other than to disjoin the hollow of his thigh. So basically, God said you cannot.
So he had to go easy on him.
So
Yeah,
where the normal rules is no hitting below the belt, this one is that's all you can do.
Yeah. There, I'm
Not
done.
exactly the Marcus of Queensberry rules, but okay. But then
Right.
it seems to be a divine trial by combat, and the the favor of God decides who wins.
All right. So Tomer, did you get all of it?
Yeah.
Okay. So verse 26. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." Now this is the guy. Jacob's on his own, and then he encounters this guy. They don't give you whoever wrote this doesn't know how to tell a story. There's no way about how you've encountered this man. There's nothing of that. Just suddenly, hey, I'm wrestling this guy, and it's kind of like when you're in a dream and you're in your house, and then you're not in your house. You're at a shopping mall. Yeah, that's
And
that's
you
what's
have
going
to
on
talk
here.
to this person that you don't want to talk to for no reason, but you're already in the middle of the conversation and you don't know how you got there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
So
and also it's this man, and then somehow we find out it's God he's wrestling.
yep, don't get ahead of the story. You're going to throw out spoilers.
Okay.
This is what I thought was interesting. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." What difference does that make? But
Well,
Jacob replied,
There is a bit on that if you want to hear that
Yeah.
now or later.
We'll get to it in a moment, and I do want to hear it, but in a moment. So, but Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Aha, bless me. Oh, wait. Back then, they thought everybody could bless anybody.
Well, I think he is at least partly aware that this is potentially a supernatural being that he's wrestling with in his dreams or in the middle of the night or whatever.
Yeah, because that's what you always do when you got somebody in a headlock. Oh, yeah, this is a supernatural being. Let me go. Let me go. No. Not until you grant me 3 wishes and show me your pot of gold.
I mean, the thing is,
Well, actually-
if he can like dislocate your hip just by touch, that's pretty powerful. Like that's got to be something a little more than human.
If you say.
Actually,
in,
there
in
is
terms of the story, it's fine to me. But
there is an interesting commentary on this. First, do you hear about the daybreak stuff?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So Rashi comments using Chazal in Chulin 91b and Bereshit Rabbah 781 that the angel had to sing God's praise at day, so that's why I had to go. Abarbanel comments that he meant to say that Jacob needs to go because Esau will come quickly. So for the benefit of Jacob, the angel advised him to let him go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always had a different interpretation of this. But Jacob replied, "Will not let you go unless you bless me." Then the man asked him, "What is your name?" Wait, why are you wrestling? You don't even know who the guy is. What's your beef with him?
And spoiler alert,
wait,
you're
I'm
God, so you should know.
Oh, I should have said about the blessing. So Rashi writes that these blessings are the admittance to the right of Isaac's blessings, which Esau lays claim. And Chizkuni writes that Jacob asks this to ensure that the angel is not angry at Jacob and that he will not harm him because he had struggled with him. So according to Chizkuni, the blessings are meant to to prove that the angel will not hurt him.
So
After
if
this
I
one.
let you go, you can't attack me. when my
There's a
back is
little
turned.
confusion here for me. Some parts of the text says it's a man. And you're saying angel, and then it starts to say that it's God who's wrestling with
Yeah,
him.
we haven't quite got there yet, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'm sure Tomer is able to read the Hebrew there, but I was looking at the Greek in the Septuagint, and it does say, well, it says human more specifically because it's anthropos, right? So that's just more generally human.
Well,
But
yeah,
so what
uh,
does the at least in verse 25, what does
in
the
25
Hebrew say?
it reads ish. In modern Hebrew, it's a person.
Okay.
In I read a noun in Targum Onkelos, which uses the word gavra, which means a man.
It's, I mean, depending on the interpretation, angels are sometimes seen as just as God in the sense of they have no free will. They just are, this smaller representation of the divine on earth doing or speaking for God, whatever he wants them to do. It sort of depends on your interpretation of angels. And of course, as with everything else, the evangelicals will sometimes pretend that this was Jesus because Jesus is the human form of God. So he is the avatar, with none of the cool parts of that. And so, then the divine creature must have been Jesus because that's the only person it could be because that's human God. So
That is so bad.
yeah, I know.
The thing I completely agree with that interpretation that because I always described angels the way that they're shown in the Old Testament as extensions of God.
Mhm.
They're like, God's fingers basically. Like he
Mhm.
fully isn't there, but like he has, his his
Agents,
effect. Yeah,
kind
his
of.
agent.
Sometimes it appears to me like he's cut, like they're his microphone, like he cuts their voice off, and I'm speaking, God's speaking now.
Yeah, and essentially that works that same way with prophets too. They're just not
Mhm.
divine by nature. Because there's that whole part in Ezekiel where he's like, you got to stop talking until I tell you to talk. But whatever.
It's creepy.
Modern game reviewer says the grifters over at the Daily Wire have started attacking atheists. Aaron, will you rebut their bullshit? I swear Ben Shapiro's quick talking makes me really angry. Well, I'm gonna surprise a bunch of people. I've never heard of the Daily Wire. I don't know what the hell that is.
Wow, that surprised me. Okay, he that's Ben's would you call it his show, his
Yeah, he
news
said
Yeah.
he
outlet?
said something really stupid once on Facebook, and I commented on it and was inundated with tens of thousands of responses.
He has his little fanboys.
There's no way I can answer tens of thousands. I mean, Facebook won't even take me to those sub threads.
No, it overloads. It simply overloads the entire
Yeah.
system. But he's he's a stupid little man. He's a stupid little rage
That's the funny thing. What he says
man.
is so dumb. Anybody could refute this, but you can't, because one, you can't talk to the guy, and two, if it's on Facebook and there's tens of thousands of followers responding, then there's no way. It becomes
Slathering
impossible to
fanboys.
communicate.
He has slathering fanboys, much the way Elon Musk still has some. Used to have
That it
more.
doesn't matter if you can demonstrate your accuracy, it still isn't going to matter to these people.
Oh no, they are the kind who worship a personality, not a actual point. It's disturbing to me, and I'm learning how isolated and neurodivergent I am by the number of people who do not give a fuck about truth if it upsets their idolization of someone. And
That's what got me started to a large degree in this. Is I was always under the impression that if you find out that something you've been saying is wrong, you must correct it. That's your moral imperative. And I thought everybody would honor that. I thought that the Board of Education, the Texas State Board of Education, would recognize, oh, we've been saying that that evolution is just a theory. We didn't understand what it was. Well, let me correct that. No, they don't have any. They don't give a fuck what the truth is. They
No.
know that what they're saying is not the truth, and they're going to teach it anyway because I've gotten that admission too.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Well, and this is where I've never understood other people's concepts of loyalty, because I have never been loyal to someone in a way that meant truth could just be denied and sidelined like that. Like, that's not, I no, that's not how I play. Apparently, it has been a major survival strategy of our species, and the majority of the normal-minded people do. And I can't respect that. I just can't.
That's where like fandom crosses the line.
Yeah.
Where it changes somebody to being like an Elon Musk bro or whatever. It becomes part of somebody's identity. And like with politics, politicians come and go, never become so in part of yourself that you're going to like not vote Democrat because what they did to Bernie. Or I hate to even bring it up because people are gonna get super mad. But
if you want a special interest, get something genuinely fictional and love it as a fictional thing.
Yeah.
Go to cons. Like, you can argue over whether or not Superman would beat Goku in a fight if you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
But that's, nobody's going to die over that, and there's no one true answer. So,
yeah, nobody's infallible. Do not follow any human. That is so much that it becomes it overtakes your personality.
Yeah.
So when I read this verse 26, when the man who's mysteriously wrestling Jacob for whatever reason says, "Let me go, for it is daybreak."
Right.
Why the hell does it matter if it's daybreak?
Right,
Only if this is God and he has to do something important every dawn, like get the sun across the sky.
Or as the Midrashic explanation says, he needs to sing God. He had to sing God's praise that day.
Yeah, that was a thing that they love to do. That is noted in later biblical sources and extra biblical sources as well. That was just a thing that angels did.
The divine beings have to praise God in the sunrise. Music in the sunrise. That's what the movie with the Nicolas Cage where he's an angel and he falls and Meg Ryan dies stupidly for no frickin' reason.
Yeah, so I have a decent little section on this from Alter. So the notion of a night spirit that loses its power or is not permitted to go about in daylight is common to many folk traditions, as is the troll or the guardian figure who blocks access to a ford or bridge. This temporal limitation.
He's a vampire.
This temporal limitation of activity suggests that the man is certainly not God himself and probably not an angel in the ordinary sense. It has led Klaus Westermann to conclude that the nameless wrestler must be thought of as some sort of demon. Nahum Sarna, which, by the way, I don't really like Nahum Sarna, he's kind of a dick, following the Midrash, flatly identifies the wrestler as the tutelary spirit of Esau, but the real point, as Jacob's adversary himself suggests when he refuses to reveal his name, is that he resists identification. Appearing to Jacob in the dark of the night before the morning when Esau will be reconciled with Jacob, he is the embodiment of portentous antagonism in Jacob's dark night of the soul. He is obviously, in some sense, a doubling of Esau as adversary, but he is also a doubling of all with whom Jacob has had to contend. And he may equally well be an externalization of all that Jacob has to wrestle with within himself. A powerful physical metaphor is intimidated by the story of wrestling. Jacob, whose name can be constructed as he who acts crookedly, is bent, permanently lamed by his nameless adversary in order to be made straight before his reunion with Esau. So that is the note given by Alter, but I think having this identification with a a demon, the way demons were thought of in the ancient world was much different than we think of them now.
I
As
suppose
like,
more like a djinn.
So there's another interpretation. So
Like
Well,
Jacob got bent over by a demon and had to be made straight again later.
don't we all?
Perfect.
Because he touched him in the hollow of his thigh. How hollow was it?
It
Okay.
was less hollow after.
God, I got
Okay,
pretty
so-
stiff after that.
Verse 28. Then the man said, "You will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome."
Yeah.
Jacob
So-
said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared."
Just make a note in your tabs, put a little tab there for anyone who says you can't see God face to face, which it also says elsewhere in the Bible that you can't see God face to face or you'll die. But here Jacob did. So, just to say.
Well, we're
But-
going to see some other people there
Garden.
too.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's a fair point. So, Tomer,
Yeah.
got any comments on verse 30?
I had comment for verse 28
Okay.
about the name Israel. So the name originated from Sarita im Elohim. So this is the striven with beings, divine or human. Sarita could have the root word sar, which means chief. Chizkuni writes that this means that Jacob became equal with angels, but did not outrank them. And Bereshit Rabbah 78:3 gives another interpretation that Jacob's features are engraved on the heavens, on high.
I know that I believe the phrasing in the King James version is, "Your name will be no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou wrestled with God or striven with God." And I know that the identity of one who wrestles with God is something the Jewish people have taken on, and to their credit, they, as we've mentioned before, there's a habit of debating and arguing about the text, and not just blindly accepting it as absolute. And that's been a part of their identity
Yeah, Lilith
for a
says
long
to
time.
their credit because she knows that Tomer and now also Lawrence, she knows, is Jewish, and she realizes she's surrounded. And
Oh, you sweet, sweet summer child. When do you think I have ever cared about who was around me, to tell the truth or not?
So
Yes.
about and verse 29, why do you ask my name? So according to Bereshit Rabbah 78:4, angels have no permanent name. So there is no point for him to ask about his name. Rashi adds that their name changes depending on the service that they are commanded to carry out. And Nachmanides writes that Jacob has no benefit with knowing his name, for no one possesses the power and the capability of God alone. And if Jacob calls him, he will not answer him, nor will save him from his troubles.
Okay, this is interesting then, because they're like the Kunari, for anyone who loves Thetis and the Dragon Age thing, I suppose, in that they don't have a personal name, they have a title role, Sten or Arishok or whatever. Similar idea. But in this one, that's an interesting thought, that then the angels would have no names. They would just be their roles and then get a different name when they had a different role. Would it even still be them? Would there be any continuity? Or is it, again, just the fingers of God reaching into reality with little people looking things, because that's going to raise the fewest eyebrows?
Yeah, we got a comment from Supno. This is why I appreciate you guys. You're able to figure out the contradictions for us. Like, I can't get through the Bible at all.
Yeah.
It's very dull in moments.
Yeah,
I am
And
very
it is confusing, because I mean, this is
Confusing.
especially confusing. Look how many
Yeah.
people we've got arguing about this.
Yeah.
And then we got the idea that the angels don't have permanent names, that their name changes with the task they perform. So So Michael does something in the Bible, and it's the same guy now called Gabriel who dictates the Quran, and it's the same guy now called Moroni who's dictating to Joseph Smith.
Well, the thing is,
And
those would be different ones. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to say that angels wouldn't have personal names for a few reasons. So the name was often held as part of one's identity. Like a person
Mm.
without a name didn't make any sense. So the and of course we get this a little bit in the Bible, but we get it even further in a lot of apocryphal literature, where we have names of angels. Now, of course, they are named for either their service or some of their attributes, maybe, and they usually end with L at the end, right?
on
To
that
have
point,
some.
there's a comment in the chat. Isaac Raskin says Gabriel equals God's strength and Raphael equals God's healing.
Yeah.
So they're like aspects of God.
Wait a minute,
Yeah.
Gabriel and what the hell? What?
Raphael.
Raphael.
Okay, Raphael.
Raphael. Wait, I don't know.
I think that might be a different spelling of Raphael, but
Okay.
it also seems
okay.
yeah, but that them as aspects, that makes sense with that. Like it's a good point to bring up. But there's also in the refusal to see the name, I also see a little bit of the ancient and almost universal superstition that the possession of someone's name gave you power over them, their true
Right.
name.
Yeah, that's
Um,
why God was always like, "I am that I am."
yeah.
You know, I'm that guy.
Well,
Yeah.
and I've heard a Jew who believed that Jesus had magical powers saying basically that he was in the temple and had the true name of God written on a medallion or something. And he didn't take it off when he left, which he was supposed to. And then because he had the true name, that gave him magical powers. And he went about doing, whatever he was supposed to have done in the
And
gospel.
Lilith too, in the folklore, she knew the
Mhm.
secret name of God and she escaped the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, that was how I flew out. I
Yeah.
used the name of God and then I could fly.
And just to
Yeah.
clarify, this is this. I think Lawrence has a comment about this. That this is what the Tetragrammaton is referring to, where they remove where they don't spell out the vowels.
Hmm.
The reason we pronounce it as Yahweh is because the vowels have been removed. We don't know what the pronunciation is, but then if you put in the right vowels, then it ends up being Jehovah.
Oh no,
Uh,
Jehovah is
no.
the vowels from Adonai. That was a deliberate mess up to make sure nobody accidentally said the name right.
The so yeah, having Jehovah would not have been likely. The thing is, there would have been different vocalizations. That's definitely true. But it seems like everyone has always thought that it was Yahweh, like other uh, authors who would often write about who would write about the Jews or the early Israelites. Sorry, um, they would since they weren't as pious, they didn't really have an issue with saying the name of their God, and it always seemed like Yahweh would be the one that always fits. There is a good section in the Invention of God on this one, actually, from Thomas Romer. There's a good section on it.
I also enjoyed the evolution of God and actually there was a brilliant breakdown in the Evidence Why I'm No Longer a Christian series that it sort of analyzed broke down the structure very well in terms of how you ended up with these different gods and now they ended up as one god and yada yada yada. Yeah, it's the history of the different understandings of God that run through the different interpretations of this text is pretty complicated.
Well,
It's
my
amazing.
thought
Before-
is Jehovah is commonly used as a name for God, and you do get that pronunciation with the Tetragrammaton, just adding those particular three vowels.
Yeah, but the Jehovah was, I believe, a deliberate wrong vowels put in order to, use the word that isn't God's name, but we all know who we're talking about.
So all
Although
this time
my
we've been saying
favorite,
God's
like
real
not
name.
saying like not saying Voldemort.
Exactly. It's the Dark Lord.
Yeah.
Not we don't say Voldemort, but I have to say my favorite potential pronunciation is still the one that associated with the what would have been called a Moabite town that I believe they originally got this god from, and that is Yahoo.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not
And-
saying it's right, but no one can prove me it's wrong.
Before we leave this verse, I want to try and reconcile like these irregularities in the Bible of the characteristics of angels before we leave this verse. And somebody in the chat said this too. There's 2 points. One, if angels don't have names, but they do, right? Gabriel, Michael, and like Michael had like no, he wasn't the angel of death. I forget who was the angel. Yeah, but 2, the second point is Satan, Lucifer. Like he was a fallen angel, but he has a name. He has free will. Like,
but
The-
Lucifer as
Satan's
the
a way
devil,
different.
that comes in way later. That's an idea that we haven't that doesn't exist yet in this text.
Yeah, we'll get there later.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a lot of convoluted mess ups and
Right. So Satan is a title. It's the adversary. And he was kind of like if it would have been an angel, but it would have been like an earthly judge. Like it would have been a divine judge, but it would have been one that's going around on earth, like, judging. So it was a divine title. And then Lucifer came from a different section where they're talking about the king of Babylon who got too big for his own britches and fell from grace.
I thought it was the king of Lebanon. We'll get to that verse.
I think it was Babylon.
I think it was like a mistranslation from Greek.
No.
Lucifer is a Greek name.
Oh,
and
Lucifer,
it meant morning star. And so when Jerome, I think, translated this part of the Bible, the name became Lucifer.
But there was also the reference to that Aaron brought up in several of his videos to the morning star Venus, and the mythology around the morning star attempting to usurp the father, the son, and all of that.
There is a lot of worship of the planet Venus in that region. Like Inanna and Ishtar are identified with the star because it was the third brightest object in the sky next to the sun and the moon. A lot of people notice it. It's in a lot of flags. If you know, the crescent moon with a star. There
the
it
dog
is.
Star.
Yeah,
the bright dog star after the moon.
I think the Hebrew itself would be if you were to. I think isn't the Hebrew Lucifer there in Isaiah? I think, and then the translation of that is just morning star. But it's not describing an angel. Nowhere in that section is it talking about an angel.
No,
it's about.
It became
that's a
that
retcon
later.
that comes later. Yeah.
So yeah, that one I would say is not a good example.
It's
there are other Satans before that we've read about before that I think Tomer brought up that when Isaac was being sacrificed, Samael was like, "Hey, why are you doing this?" Accuser, type.
That wasn't Jacob who
and
said
the
Christ.
the
That was
fully
Isaac.
developed devil appears.
Yeah, I said Isaac.
When Isaac in the Hebrew, in the Muslim version where it's Ishmael that sacrificed, the fully formed devil is already a part of mythology, and he is trying to talk them out of it. So again, this seems to be one of those retcons, but also, and this is our understanding becomes a retcon, but it's important to understand also that the concept of the devil never came from a single source. There's a lot of threads and bits and here and there that are pulled in and eventually evolved into this character that we think of in our modern Christian mythology.
So now we go right back to Dante, right?
I did a speech about that
Mhm.
called "Give the Devil His Due." If anybody wants to see it, because it's one of the more
Oh,
popular presentations I've ever done.
I've seen it.
Tomer, I've got a question for you. How would you
Yeah.
translate verse 30?
Well, in verse 30, as I've read it, it reads the face of God. However, because it uses Elohim. However, Elohim could also refer to
The host.
several gods or angels. In the JPS, it translates to a divine being. And in the Targums, like Targum Onkelos and Jonathan, they use the angels, Malachia, or let me see where it was. Uh, what is this precisely? Yeah, Malachaya, which means angels.
Isn't it a little
So
frustrating that with all these different translations and everything, even when we go back to the original Hebrew, we still can't get verification? Is this God?
Well, the thing is, in their conception, it would have been God, at least a part of God.
Yeah, a
So,
divine
Yeah.
representation, which is of
Yeah.
God, which is what an angel is.
yeah.
A small piece of the divine coming in to bugger about
But
on earth.
then later, some of the angels have the ability to defy God. If they're a part of God, how do they defy God?
This is where you have
Well, they don't.
multiple contradictory mythologies
Well,
going
they
on.
don't have free will except Satan
But wait,
and a third of the angels
remember?
who
Wait,
follow
Again,
when
him.
we
that's later, guys.
can we talk about Nephilim?
Right. Again, that is also way later.
Mm,
Uh,
Oh, yeah,
so
that's a hell of a retcon.
yeah, that's yeah.
That's all your mythological stories are also true and are covered by the angels who came down and banged ladies and giants and monsters and demons. Oh my!
The
Uh,
angels who don't have genitalia.
Maybe you know
yeah.
what? Maybe it's an optional extra. Maybe it's like an add-on for your sim. You have to pay extra.
Well,
That's smart. That's smart.
All right, I've got one more verse of this thing
You
I'm
know
going
what?
to read so we
Maybe
can
they
get this
got
thing knocked
themselves
out of
some.
here.
Maybe they got themselves some dicks, got super horny, and then we're like, you know what? We don't like this whole not having sex thing, and then they
We
rebelled
should
against that.
totally bang.
Yeah.
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 Well, you get on the premium plan package, you get a bunch of extra mods, and the next thing you know, you're playing God. Anyone who's ever had a Skyrim account knows that.
And suddenly, Selma Hayek's character has definition.
Why not?
So the sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon.
yeah, so this is actually a commandment in Judaism. It's here in it refers to Gid Hanasheh, which it is identified as the sciatic nerve or sciatic nerve. So, according to the Book of Education, or Sefer HaChinuch, it explains the roots of this commandment. It reads, "It is a hint to Israel that though they will suffer many troubles in the exile by the hand of the nations and by the hand of the descendants of Esau, i.e., the Christians, the Jews should trust that they will not perish, but rather that their descendants and name will stand firm forever, and that their Redeemer will come and redeem them from their oppressor, and in continually." Remembering this idea through the commandment that serves as a reminder, they will stand firm in their faith and righteousness forever. It
Okay.
also reads. It also reads that he who transgresses this commandment and eats a whole sciatic nerve, even if it is less than an olive's worth, is to be lashed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Pinky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So be
Sure,
very
like you do.
careful how you cut that. If you get the
Yeah.
fugu chef.
They're like, you're gonna eat that, and like everybody's like, no.
All right,
They're-
so a couple more chats here. Perplexed Papa offers $20. Thank you. Says for every dollar, an angel loses its wings.
Aw.
And then Kent McLeod Jr. says, I heard that the ancient Jews, when polytheistic, settled on Yahweh, God of war, and I am curious as to why exactly.
So, when it comes to Yahweh and their basically their takeover of Canaan, um, they would have required a war god to do that in their own mind. So so he was initially, would have been a god of war, and then became a war and storm god, while still maintaining a polytheistic outlook. And then eventually we get to henotheism, where he's the one God that should be worshipped, and then we get to monotheism later.
I think,
Um,
yeah, I think it's important to understand that there was a cult sect that pushed for the henotheism of Yahweh, that there were a lot of Jewish people who, for a very long time, were happy to worship multiple gods, but this extremist sect took over, and especially through ruling through Josiah, the boy king, and we'll get into all of that with Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomistic history. They gained political power, and then they retconned that he was always our God and we were never allowed to worship any other gods, and all our heroes are people who tore down, the symbols of other gods. That was all retcon. This is a case of history is written by the winners, and in this case, God is too. So.
Yeah, and there are a lot of hints within the biblical tradition
Oh, yeah.
that show that they worship their gods, like a whole bunch of Jews that had idols in their homes. And furthermore, go check Psalm 82 if anyone out there is wondering.
And they
Psalm
were
82.
prohibited from bringing trees into their houses, and bringing a tree into your house was Asherah worship, who was once the wife of God.
Yeah, and if you want to check that, it's Joshua 10. I can remember off the top of my head.
Good one. I can never remember the reference to that one.
Yeah.
I suck at remembering references, so I just memorized half the Bible. So I have the text. I'm just like, oh, it's blah, 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 blah. Where do you find that? I have no idea, but I quoted it perfectly, so I don't care. My brain's weird.
So Isaac Raskin says religious Jews always read. I'm gonna guess that's Yahweh. That's
this
the Tetragrammaton, and I'm having to try to read it backwards. That's what Hebrew. Religious Jews always read Yahweh as either Adonai or Elohim, depending on the vowels used.
Mm-hmm.
I also say when I see this, I say Adonai because of habit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a long-standing Jewish tradition to have the forbidden thing, and then you build a fence around the forbidden thing so that you don't accidentally, and then sometimes that impulse can get a little bit carried away.
So I got to tell you that you guys have changed my interpretation on this, because I always thought that was a nut shot.
I can't prove you wrong, I gotta say. I mean, it's. Ugh.
Well, spoiler alert, it was quite a nut shot if he was limping the next day, which it says later.
Yeah.
His nuts went all the way up inside. Oh.
And now Phobos comments says, isn't the Lucifer idea originally referring to Athar, the Canaanite Ugaritian deity?
I haven't heard that, actually. That's a good question.
I never heard that either.
Yeah, me neither.
It depends on who you ask when.
Yeah.
So like and I'm thinking historically here, the Satan character seems to have started out as as an associate of Yahweh, like his right hand man or whatever. And then just like you have you always have stories about the brothers in conflict. You also have the close friends conflict thing, and so Satan was initially one of God's friends, and then so this is how Satan shows up.
He did God's dirty work. He was the left hand of God and did God's dirty work, and was the prosecuting attorney, and he took the ugly jobs, and. But again, there's in a sense no original, because it's a very piecemeal idea. So one of the original roots may indeed have been, although I've never heard of Athtar, I will look into that sometime if I get a chance, hopefully. But yeah, it's a very.
And then there's an adaptation from Angra Mainyu, which the Zoroastrian interpretation of Hashitan, what was it called? Ahriman the opposer.
Yes.
Yeah, and of course the opposer is Hashatan, which is where we get Satan from.
Well, the thing is, that's the same thing in the Hebrew. It's the same word. So the thing is, they already had a character like that, but then during the exile, it probably would have been integrated together, because they were talking about two different things with the same name, and then it got integrated. So you kind of have this syncretism, and no matter what people try to tell you, the Jews were very syncretic, and in Babylon especially.
Mhm.
So yeah, sorry about the dog. Uh, so I think there's actually a comment about that as well. One of the next ones it looks like that from Ivory Darkness. Yeah, I heard somewhere that the name Satan comes from Shaitan, who was a jinn in Arabic tradition. Possibly all this isn't about angels, possibly just jinn fighting amongst themselves. Yeah, so um, uh, when we come to the
Yeah, I think
origins
Peter
of.
missed that. He was supposed to put the Ivory Darkness's comment up there.
No, it's on there.
Okay, there we
Yeah, I'm
go.
reading from there. But okay, so the origins of Satan and the equivalent in other parts of the ancient Near East, they kind of went off their own ways until eventually coming back together into this new thing that it wasn't before. Um, so I don't know if see, I wouldn't say that it was initially like a jinn. I'm not sure exactly on like the very first origin of it. I'm only aware of the origins of it in Judaism. Uh,
I could
so I have
certainly
to.
see
What
it
is the
melding with
word?
the concept of a jinn.
What is the word for angel in Hebrew?
Malach.
Oh, so
Uh,
not angel sounds like jinn a little bit, but not malach.
Would I, as an American, read that as Molech?
hmm.
Which would be
Oh.
interesting, yeah.
You know, the comparisons between the gods that they badmouth, because Baal and Ashtar were part of the same pantheon that the Jews worshipped for the longest time, and then they go on to badmouth, and then the stuff about Molech. I mean, it's yeah there and one of the things I find very interesting is that we can discuss like the original interpretation. We can give 6 different original interpretations, and they're all true for various points in the origin of the text, because these texts are not, they are written at one time, compilated at another time, edited at another time, revised at another time, and the concepts in religion are different at all of these times.
It's like a crazy quilt knitted together piecemeal of stories.
Yeah, it really is. And
Um,
So
and
I
half of
Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, and half the patches are torn from 16 other quilts,
Yeah,
some
I
of which were torn
like
from other things that were originally together, but we can never quite be sure about who was where.
um. Before we leave this topic, this is where I feel like I like Armasing, Lilith, and Tomer and Lawrence. They're studied. They do their homework on this, and I this is where I feel like my contribution is that for a Christian, for a lot of American Christians, and probably in other countries too, the Old Testament mentions of the opposer Hashatun. They mean Satan. Um, they mean Satan. Like Satan is ever present in every part of the Bible, even if he wasn't really thought of that way by the original people of who wrote this, because that's a really major thing with Christians. And
Yeah.
I feel like my contribution is cultural, that
Mhm.
I've been an atheist for 15 years, but I still have these structures in my mind from being
Yeah.
indoctrinated. And I see comments from other people on our videos that they're trying to take it apart too. So this is where my perspective is. I'm trying to deconstruct it. So when when I ask questions like what is Satan actually, I'm trying to understand it from what it is, not for what I was indoctrinated to believe it was.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And it's a very important context, and thank you for reminding us of that, because a lot of and a lot of people here, not everyone who watches is from North America, but many are, and evangelicals are trying to spread their ideology to other places and sending missionaries to Europe and all kinds, Asia and
Africa.
Africa and all kinds of places, anywhere they can get a foothold in. And so their simplistic and frankly demonstrably false in most times interpretation is nonetheless a meme, a viral meme with which we must contend.
In the Vietnamese Catholic tradition I was raised in, Satan is ever present.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
very
and
dark.
it's fear
important
is
to
a good
remember, though,
motivator.
if this book is God breathed and every word of it is literally true, then it says that Jacob saw God face to face.
It does. That is what the word said. And
Yeah.
also apparently don't eat nerves, which I'm okay with avoiding, honestly. I'm just like,
And I didn't know that was really referring to a nerve. I still thought it was a crotch thing because, I mean,
Oh,
not
don't eat crotches.
not everybody eats genitalia. But well, my wife, talk about her Vietnamese heritage. Well, she took me to a Vietnamese restaurant that served bull penis, apparently in its
okay.
own gravy.
Soup.
Well, there's prairie oysters are also the genital the nuts of bulls, or well, former bulls. So you know
It's a
it
cow now.
it's I don't know what the term gelding refers to
At
horses. I
least
don't know what
it
the
doesn't
equivalent
go
is
to
for dogs.
waste.
It doesn't
that
go to
way.
waste. That's true. I still don't want to eat nuts, but not that kind anyway. But prairie oysters in Alberta, that's a thing.
Yeah, we had some in Colorado.
Yeah.
Just because Rocky Mountain oysters, yeah, some
Yeah,
digital.
she wanted to have it just because, and I wasn't interested at all, and then accidentally, absent-mindedly forgot what it was that was on my plate.
Yeah.
I have to point out, Isaac Raskin says removing the sciatic nerve from the meat is a difficult and expensive process for commercial butchery. So a lot of hind parts from kosher slaughter are sold to the general meat market, and the process which you remove the sciatic nerve is called nikul, which literally translates to as I think it's stabbing, literally, but
Wow.
yeah. I actually prepared a whole page about if a debate between commentators if the event between Jacob and the angel happened in reality, like happened physically, or was it just in a vision? But I don't think we have time for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sorry that we don't.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe next time.
Yeah, let me get through some of these comments. Save that. We'll open with that. next
Christians
time.
kind of do this too. If they go, no, it's totally true, and then if it doesn't make sense, they'll go, no, it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tomer, would you please make a note that we'll start out with your commentary on this next
Yeah,
week?
sure.
All right. So let me get through these comments. Isaac Rackskin says,
Yeah, I've commented on his.
yeah, we read that one. James's interviews says, Aaron Ra, what do you think of the theory that Yahweh was a development from Baal worship with some modifications and synthesis? I heard that recently on the Mythological podcast. Well, I think there's an awful lot of different religions that seem to share tropes together. As I mentioned, the thing that we were talking about today also appears in Hinduism. That very story. I mean, the names of the characters have changed, but the essence of the thing is exactly the same. A human wrestles a god. The god cheats. It was described the same way. Hit him in the hollow of the thigh, and the human still wins against the god in a wrestling match. I mean, that's so these religions are borrowing from each other. We were just talking about how Satan comes from this idea, that idea, from the Zoroastrians, and so on. They all have this enemy character, and they integrate different pieces of it to become one guy, much like Moses, himself, a conglomeration of the pharaoh Snefru and his more accurately his mage Jajamank, and then there's elements that seem to be taken from Hammurabi and from Sargon of Akkad, and I forget the other elements, but I mean a lot of these are just popular stories that if you told them with the original name, nobody knows that original name. So what would often happen in folk tales is they would take they would get rid of the original name that nobody knows, and they would staple on the name of somebody that's popular. And so this is how Lord Krishna, for example, has so many adventures, way more than Jesus does. I mean, Lord Krishna was like he had more adventures than Sinbad in the old folklore. And then Jesus did the same. So if you look at the early church fathers, like Justin Martin, who said now I wish that I had access to the books that he's talking about, because he's referencing stories we don't get in the Bible. He's referencing
Yeah.
things that have since been destroyed, have since been criminalized at the Nicene Convention and so forth. So I would love to see what stories he's referring to. But he says that all of these adventures of Jesus having great strength, of Jesus carting the sun across the sky as his daily duty. Now remember how that relates to what we just read. God has to get up. God has to get Jacob to let him go because he has to get the sun across the sky. This is what Justin Martyr was saying.
Well, that was one of the interpretations. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to put a little footnote on that. We should be weary of falling into a trap of parallelomania.
Yeah.
So if you can show that there was a historical link between two specific faiths, that one would have gotten one from that one would have gotten a story from another, then it's fine for me it's fine to talk about. But when you're talking about like really disparate things, it gets more difficult, and I try to, for the most part, steer clear of it.
On
Uh,
that note, yeah, the parallelism,
Mm-hmm.
Baal, doesn't it mean Lord
Yeah.
in Hebrew?
Well, and
So, like, maybe on his question, it is El from Baal. Maybe.
So the thing is,
now,
I do have this is pretty much what the historical consensus is, that so initially you have a separate god, Yahweh, being integrated into a greater pantheon, which included Baal, and over time, many aspects of Baal were overtaken to Yahweh worship,
yeah.
and eventually we get this modern uh, idea of Yahweh and the Hebrew God. Um,
Mhm.
And,
but
and it goes even further than that, though. Like they did integrate Baal, it seems like, into Yahweh, his aspects, but then it seems like they demonized
They
Baal.
did.
yeah,
They
Like
did.
Beelzebub,
Well,
Lord of the Flies.
it's like, which was a mispronunciation, as Aaron so often points out, of Beelzebul, Lord on high.
Uh-huh.
It's these were originally part of the same pantheon, and the Canaanite pantheon, where El was the head deity, and Asherah and Baal. These were all gods of this pantheon. And when the Yahwist supremacists, retconned things, they would take these attributes of these different gods and, oh no, that's not them, that's really Yahweh, and then continue to demonize the worshippers of other gods and build up their own god more and more. And so there would be some transference with Baal. I mean, this was the same region, this was the same people, and this is a real another case of history being written by the winners in
And
this case of a theological war.
you see that in the Egyptian attempt at monotheism with Akhenaten. It
Mm.
only wanted to worship the Aten and no other gods. And
Mhm.
the priest somehow, Akhenaten died, and the priest changed his son uh, Tutenaten's name to Tutankhamun.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's these very powerful sects that don't want to lose power. Hey, wait, we're worshiping Aten now. What happened to Amun? And so so it's consolidating power, like with
Yeah.
the Yahweh. Is my
Mm-hmm.
point.
I just want to comment. My wife looks real pretty in our camera.
You silly.
Oh.
All right. So X-Comer ZZZ offers 50 Norwegian kroner. Thank you. Says, looking outside in, are you concerned about the growth of fundamentalist extreme Christian right? Well, yeah, I've literally
Yes.
made a career out of countering them as best I can.
And that too. Look at what the Christian right has done to Yahweh, and
Yeah.
Jesus. Very, very different from what the original is. Like
Oh yeah.
it's white Jesus. That's who with an AR-15.
Yeah, white Jesus riding a dinosaur with an AR-15.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
although he's
Steve.
Jewish, so it should have been an Uzi.
Oh,
Fair enough. Fair enough. But they forget he's Jewish because he can't be Jewish because something racism.
As we are
Honestly,
over time, and I do have another obligation coming up. I'm going to run through these chats.
okay.
Matt White says, so Aaron, big, loud, boisterous, and Lilandra. small, shy, and retiring. Would love to know how you two met. Christianforums.com.
Yes. Back when everybody used to discuss things on the internet on forums. Like Arn started all the way back on Usenet discussing evolution,
Oh my
like
God.
way in the baby internet. You know?
I love that. I love that so much for you.
Yeah. I was a Christian who wanted to learn more about evolution, and there were all these atheists in the creation evolution forum. And they're all trying to set us straight. And it wasn't just their information that helped me to understand it. It was all the creationists that just kept insisting, no, it's this way. No, it's this way. Show me the evidence. You can't find a missing link. Show them a missing link. That's not a missing link. That's a weird animal. You know, that's like, am I doing that? Am I being this intellectually dishonest? You know, this literal? And that helped me to deconvert also.
I remember long, because I've been watching Aaron for several years, where he mentioned that the challenge he would give to creationists of, I will explain evolution in such a way that you will accept it as a reality if you give me the time to do so. And he said only one person ever took me up on that and followed all the way through honestly, and I married her.
Yeah, that is true. And one of the first things he said to me even before we met is, if you want to stay a Christian, then you don't want to discuss this topic with me.
Yeah, her deconversion was a process.
Well done, sir.
That was memorable, and I wish I could talk more about that, but I don't have time. So let me run through this. Rasputis, $5. How about we just don't eat meat because it's a barbaric practice? I get that. I understand my hypocrisy there. I'm glad that technology is catching up to that, but I'm still eating a turkey today.
It was. It says it was certified humane, though.
Yeah. And then Isaac Raskin, this is our last comment. Please don't throw any more comments because we got to get out of here. Isaac Raskin says, at Tomer, can you mention that the word malak means messenger also and is used to refer to the messengers Jacob sends to Esau?
Well, Isaac, I've already done this. I commented that I would do it in this next time, but Isaac did so. Isaac is interested to appear on the show, and I'm also, because he is Jewish as well, and I think he's Orthodox Jewish, or was Orthodox Jewish, and he knows a lot about Judaism more than I do. So, and
Okay,
From a
well, get in
cultural
touch. Get in touch, and we can put him on the mailing list.
Hey, I
Yeah.
put a comment in the chat so he can send me an email and I'll forward it to you, Arn.
Thank you very much.
It's not just the text of what the Torah says. It's also a culture, so he could help us understand the culture, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to have to get out of here. We do expect to see everybody next week. We're good for next week.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All right. So this be Genesis 33.
Yep.
Very good.
Fun times.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.